Welcome to TradingNBI.com. This is John. This reports for the 17th of January. Well, we dipped back down to, well, below the 50%, and that just accelerated the selling until we got, well, back to the previous algo here at 46.13. Went past that a little bit towards that 38%, which was all the way down at 08, and that caught by pretty quickly from there. And you can see that we've been leaning towards that setup anyway because magenta moving back above yellow was bullish, as well as the NBI white moving back below red. So those were all bullish characteristics. And we also had shorts fading along with rising DOC green, which is midterm buyers, so kind of a P2 from that standpoint. If red turns around the next day or so, you'll have a P2 there. Those will all be bullish signs, but for the fact that that shakeout is in some pretty rough territory, and you'd have to have some pretty decent upside movement to kind of alter where that is. But for now, hanging around that 50% and maintaining these setups. Again, those pivots below the 25, you get another one that pivots lower and a white pivot up subsequently, then I would be looking for a serious move that's going to really break below and move towards the 0% line. That would be significant because we just haven't seen any of that kind of behavior activity given the way things are. I mean, the talk of tightening and everything has just been that, nothing but talk, and we can see the market really isn't buying much of that, but a lot of this has been rotation into the acceptance that some of that may take place. Now, interesting divergence with the NASDAQ because we do have white already leading over, though with the magenta rising, everything was okay from that standpoint. We're expecting a breakdown from that, just softness. And of course we have the ABM resetting all the way down here, and that which makes it easy to use these as playoff levels, which makes, I think, the most effective. And of course the 23% being critical at this particular point. Every time you're below that, I think you want to expect to be to the downside and looking for more downside, because the NASDAQ has been the real weakness of all of this when you have, well, almost half the stocks in the NASDAQ at or making 52-week lows. A lot of this hasn't happened since, well, 2000. Take that for what it's worth, but it's interesting to note. Gold still holding above its 50%. You know, it's just a question of when it takes off, not if, and it's just going to be a question of how staggered or quickly it happens. I remember we had big runs when I was very, very young, just the historical readings of it. You know, it would just gap open and be, you know, hundreds of dollars, and that's higher, and that's exactly what you face in those kind of situations. From a euro standpoint, saw a nice little pop. How sustainable that is for the euro is really questionable, given the fact that, while yes, the U.S. is not doing anything about its situation, what is the euro going to do as a counter to that? Not a whole lot. And you can see rates rising here, and we would expect the lows on this TLT to be broken lower, which would indicate even higher yields. And the further that gets out of control, while rates and stuff haven't changed, then you know that there's a disconnect between where the market is pricing and where reality is, at least from a Fed standpoint, because they're still going to have to raise quite a bit before they even get to zero effective rate. From a Bitcoin standpoint, 60-minute, after we hit that fill of the positive extreme at 39, it's been solid basing since there, moved up, came back, all following pretty consistent with the readings, no objections to any of that. And likewise, I've said too with Ethereum, it's much cleaner, just because of the added volume as well as the consistency with which it follows the algorithms. Makes it very nice. So it's definitely a great alternative to both ES and that. And of course the ES, off of that dip and everything, kind of basing there, and once it got above the 23%, that was green time. And it's pretty consistent because it's been magenta rising above. So that's the early precursor to suggesting that there's some strength to this. Of course, going to have to break 50%. And literally going to be looking for magenta to stay under that 33 in order for it to be sustainable for any length of time. Intraday is quite nice. We had early signals right back here when it was just floating across. This is what I like to see, at least a breakdown of the blue below the gray right there, and the magenta falling. If I don't, especially if I don't have white MBI over red. Because when you get into these, you can have extreme runs of that. And in this particular case, that was clean, as well as you had orange pivoting over and steel dipping below cyan. And usually, as long as that stays intact, and pretty good. And it lasted literally until you had to dip below the red line, and even that ended up with a second move where you then created P2. And literally from the P2, but we like to say earn it, or at least show that you can get there. I mean, look at how it stayed along that 23%, just like a little bit of a torture as it continued, but finally getting enough juice to bounce from it after putting the secondary P2 at an even higher level, allowing for the green run all the way up to the hundreds. It was a pretty active day when you think about how much volume existed in here. Peaked out again, even though we saw price rising in divergence. There was no question from an algo standpoint, it was staying red with that, and rightfully so. It popped all the way back down to the 0%, which was expected from that pop here. Same thing right here with this pop, but magenta stays over, so it's not to the signaling point, and then it cascades to the 0. So very clean from that aspect. And then the buy that happened later, so late Friday buyers, and that was it for the remainder of the time. So pretty much we stayed down, if not for a 40-point move, just for late buyers at the very end, lifting it up. So that's where we're currently at, and I think that this kind of volatility and uncertainty is just going to continue. There's nothing stopping it, because you're getting counter signals from both sides, but you're seeing also market forces, kind of force situations that may seem unpleasant and certainly could have much more detrimental market value impact going forward. So we will keep an eye on it, and as always, I will update you on Snapchat. Trade well. Talk to you later.